Origin Chance Home Receive Reaction. This is Vlad the Impaler, The Living Dead, Extra History Part 5 by the channel Extra Credits. I think this is the last part, yes? Yeah, because clearly he said in the previous episode, fourth part, where this reign is going to last 2 months, so I guess, yeah. Vlad managed to reclaim his throne for the third time just before dying a few months later. Even his death is steeped more in legend than truth, but the stories do not end there. His legend was already beginning to spread across Europe, and we all know what happens when a particular Irish author gets a hold of the legend. Yeah, Dracula is born, I guess. So let's watch this one. This has been a fun series, right? This is literally the latest one. Yeah, you know, they just did this. I guess this was 15 days ago or something. I don't know. But this was really awesome, right? They should tackle more, names of the past like this, like, Vlad the Impaler. But there is a mystique around them, right? So, there's always fun to see history about these people. But by knowing the truth of those history, we can also see the psychological toll it had on the people throughout the history. Because how they become this kind of myth and legend. So it's always fun. So let's watch it.
1476, Constantinople. A messenger stands before Mehmed the Conqueror. He brings news of a victory against the tyrant Vlad III, who has massacred the faithful and spurned Mehmed's friendship. But the messenger didn't come alone. He carries a box, which upon its opening reveals the head of the treacherous, slain son of the dragon. Or at least that's what one story says. Because like many of the stories in this series, the accounts of how Vlad died are contradictory. We just know that 2 months into his third reign, he fought a battle with the Ottomans and lost. In fact, it's kind of ironic that given all of the excruciating detail we have about how Vlad killed his foes, we know little about his own death. But death was not the end of Vlad Dracula. Because if there's one truth about human culture, it's this. When history doesn't provide a fitting end to a historical life, legend's gonna step in to finish the job. And Dracula refused to stay in the grave.
Yeah, I don't know what's with that, right? I mean, that's how our culture are. That's how our people are, right? When we don't know something, we suddenly immediately goes to the imagination. UFO, unidentified flying object. So it must be alien from outer space. Like, just because we don't know what it is does not mean it's something, but our mind suddenly raced to that. Like, ooh, this is fun, this is mystery, right? Is it this? Is it this? That is how our mind evolved. I don't know why. I don't know how to explain that, right? It can't be our tribal genes that pass on, because what does imagination has to do with survival? So I don't know why our mind is like that. Maybe, because of the survival, we had to think a lot. And that made us, I guess, more thinking culture, right? That's why, I guess there is even saying that a person who's, I guess, free a lot, right? Thinks really evil thoughts, because the person's going to think and think and think. It's really hard to not think for hours and on. So I guess our mind evolved for thinking because we needed thinking to survive, and thinking breeds this kind of I guess circle that basically you just think and think and then start to think beyond the reality and start to imagine. I don't know. But yeah, every time, like in 2012 when there was a thing the world's going to end, people were genuinely disappointed when the world didn't end because they were excited for it. I mean, your rational thinking gets override by your imagination. Like, oh, this is fun, world's going to end. Dude, you're gonna die. Oh no, but this is 2012. Minds might be right. Oh, this is exciting. Like, what? But that is something that, I see that pattern everywhere. Our imagination really runs wild immediately. It doesn't even take time, right? Something mysterious, people start to think things.
Thanks so much to CuriosityStream for helping raise the stakes in historical storytelling. Despite his relatively brief time on the throne of Wallachia, less than 7 years in total, at the time of Vlad Dracula's death, he was already casting an outsized shadow over history. For instance, do you remember back in episode 3 when we talked about the parade of cruelty and massacre during Vlad's second reign? Well, one of those incidents that might have gotten lost in the sheer cacophony of awfulness was Vlad's massacre of Transylvanian Saxons in Brasov, an act that had huge consequences. See, those Saxons were German, and while they had come to the area a couple of centuries before, they still had family and trade ties with their homeland. which in the mid to late 15th century was one of Europe's greatest centers of printing and publishing. Now, many early books and pamphlets printed in Europe essentially functioned as political and religious propaganda. And after his massacres of Saxons in Brajov, Saxon printers made Vlad a favorite villain in their printings. Meaning, as Vlad cooled his heels as a captive in Hungary, he was becoming internationally famous for cruelty and butchery, a portrayal that only escalated after his death. Now, it's important to note that many of these stories printed about Vlad were exaggerated, and a bunch likely not true at all. In fact, we've been very careful to not draw on them too much as sources, and label said sources appropriately in the rare times that we do. Because while this genre of writing was originally intended to smear one's enemies, it also became a sort of early horror literature, even as far back as the 15th and 16th centuries.
I mean, it goes hand in hand, right? Earlier times, time of battle, time of war, people used the writing as a weapon, as a tool. I guess propaganda is strong more than anything, I guess. If you can change people's mind around the world, that is strong weapon than anything. So they used it like that, but that also amplifies the, evilness that you're trying to portray. So now, Vlad the Impaler is really evil, like, nobody has ever seen. That's how you're portraying them. So obviously all this talk of him being this kind of a, dangerous thing, like some supernatural thing, obviously that's going to become a real thing now. Like, how they're portraying that he's drinking blood of his victims. Like, holy shit.
The general rule for publications was, if it bleeds, it leads. Meaning, stories of blood and guts sold well, particularly if they came along with gruesome woodblock prints. Even ostensibly serious religious books, like the 1563 publication Fox's Book of Martyrs, for instance, would get spiced up with lurid scenes of Protestants getting tortured or burned at the stake. Also, Catholic art and publications had a similar fascination with violent imagery. And the existing stories about Vlad served as a perfect jumping-off point for German authors to create stories about him doing, well, basically any twisted thing they could imagine.
Yeah, but is that so hard to imagine? Didn't he say in this series earlier that, around this time there were lots of brutal killings and, punishment around the world, around the Europe, bludgeoning people to death, breaking their bones, skinning people alive, boiling them alive, impaling them. If people, kids and everybody just seeing that every day in their towns, shock of somebody dying wears off. Now it's become a thing that people want to, I guess, read and watch, right? I mean, that's just fucked up, right? That's the in the area civilization goes that you don't really want, right? When, somebody dying just becomes a thing, right? Somebody brutally dying, like boiling alive, skinning them alive, just become a thing, and people just watch it for entertainment. That's that's just fucked up area where the society has gone. But that's where this point was.
The Ottomans, similarly, were happy to preserve stories about Vlad's awfulness, since it justified removing him and made Hungary look bad for supporting him. Early biographers also played a part in this mythologizing, though sometimes to Vlad's benefit. For example, a Greek biographer who appreciated Vlad's years fighting the Ottoman Empire while acknowledging Vlad's cruelty also went out of his way to try and discredit Radu. This included claims that Radu converted to Islam, which is debatable, and that he and Mehmed were
so I guess he probably just writing, yes, Vlad the Impaler is evil, yes, he's brutal, yes, he drinks the blood of his victim, but at least he's not a bitch like Radu is, who's just in the bed with Ottomans.
Actually a gay couple, a portrayal historians also find suspect, since it only exists in one very anti-Ottoman source. But before you come at us, all you Mehmed Radu stans, we're not saying this wasn't a thing, just that it's not totally established fact. Ooh, but you know what is a fact? Until this very series, Rob didn't know that people actually shipped historical figures. But now he can't unknow it. Anyway, one important thing to consider is that despite all of the things said about Vlad, he was never, in any sense, accused of being a vampire. That was the work of Irish writer Bram Stoker, who ran across accounts of Vlad as he prepared to write a vampire novel that would marry Romanian folklore with 19th century technology and medical.
Yeah, but I don't think, obviously I don't have expertise on this, but as far as whatever things I've seen, somewhat researched and watched, being a vampire wasn't a thing until the TB outbreak, right? TB outbreak basically spearheaded vampire thing. I said this in one of the video and people like, no, it's the Vlad the Impaler who started the Dracula thing. Yeah, but at the time people didn't call him vampire because he wasn't a thing, right? Yes, drinking blood and all these things portrayed him as evil. But vampire, he's a vampire, that wasn't a thing at the time, right? New England's TB outbreak, which had all the sign of vampire that we know of today, because Bram Stoker basically wrote that in the Dracula. That basically led to Vlad the Impaler being Dracula thing, because Bram Stoker used that New England TB outbreak as a basis to write his novel about Vlad the Impaler, Dracula basically. So yeah, at the time people didn't see him as a vampire. That's not a thing, because it started with the New England TB outbreak.
Knowledge. Now, exactly how much inspiration Stoker took from Vlad has been hotly debated among historians. There are those who argue that he did extensive research on Romania, its folklore, and its history. Libraries he used have discovered margin notes in books on the subjects, and Jonathan Harker's journey into the Carpathian Mountains is broadly correct in its descriptions of routes, terrain, and even some local beliefs. Also in the novel, Stoker's Dracula even talks about raiding across the Danube and fighting the Ottomans in his life. But then the discovery of Stoker's notes in the 1970s turned a lot of these theories on their heads. Now, historians generally agree that Stoker knew little of Romania and essentially copied Harker's route and descriptions of the countryside from a 19th century travel guide. His descriptions of Dracula don't match Vlad at all, and he drew upon previous English vampire novels as much as Romanian folklore. His notes, in fact, don't even contain the name Vlad III. They do, however, seem very excited about the fact that several princes were from a family line called Dracula. So excited, in fact, that in his notes he actually scrawled, "Dracula in Wallachian means devil," with Dracula and devil in all caps. In other words, he probably just liked the name, but didn't really know what it meant.
The guy is basically your, modern day, I guess, people that fight on the Twitter and social media, taking half-truths and running wild with your imagination. There you go. I approve our paper trail, yeah, but how much truth? If it's not 100% truth, it's not really truth, is it?
Actually was understandable, because by the 19th century, the word for devil and dragon had become interchangeable in Romanian. Plus, the local folklore of the time had forgotten the Order of the Dragon connection, claiming that Vlad was called Dracula for his cruelty. But even though his knowledge on the references he drew from and translation of the name of its title character is flawed, let's also try to remember that Stoker originally named his vampire Count Wampir and titled the book simply The Undead. I know, Zoe, I wouldn't watch Christopher Lee in that either. So that's how the outside world knew Vlad the Impaler. From Stoker's moderately successful novel, to blockbuster play, television and film adaptations, to Halloween costumes, games, and a whole tourism industry in Romania centered around Dracula's castle. A castle that Vlad probably never visited, and that Bram Stoker never saw. But don't let that stop you from going, actually, because it's still a pretty frickin' cool castle. But that international fame is only half the story. Because while everyone outside Romania saw Vlad as either a psychopath or blood-drinking Victorian monster, Romania itself had its own view. To speak very broadly, in the century after Vlad's death, Wallachia and Moldavia became Ottoman tributary states, whereas Transylvania remained independent for 2 centuries before falling under the Austro-Hungarian Empire. At times, between 2 and 3 of the kingdoms shared the same monarch, drawing them closer together. Then by the 19th century, the 3 had enough of a shared sense of identity that they launched a series of simultaneous rebellions with the goal of independence. Finally, in 1878, in the aftermath of the Russo-Turkish War, Wallachia and Moldavia united to form Romania and later added Transylvania after World War I. And a core component of 19th century nationalism was drawing historical heroes out from history. And at a time when Wallachia and Moldavia were struggling for independence from Ottoman rule, Vlad the Impaler fit the mold of a hero that spoke to the present issue. In Romania, he was seen as a brutal but fair ruler who kept Wallachia independent for a time and died defending his land from...
I mean, that's really easy to see, right? I've been saying that from the first video. That Vlad the Impaler's father, right? Dragon, whatever. He had a real struggle to keep the 2 forces away, Hungary and Ottoman Empire, because Wallachia is not that big. How you can go against Ottoman Empire and Hungary? So all his ancestors had a real issue. Anybody who came to the throne was becoming a puppet of one of the 2 states, and he was literally sandwiched between 2 powers. If he support one power, other power attacks. If he supports other power, the opposite of that attacks. And they even jumped from left and right. Sometimes they supported Hungary, sometimes they supported Ottoman Empire, and that complicated things as well. And his father died like that. The tactics that he used was really fucked up and brutal, but at least for whatever time, he made sure that he was independent, like no other power basically just swooped in and take it over. He was independent because of his brutal tactics. Now obviously for the local people there, that would become a heroic thing, right? Like we are fighting for our independence and only one hero we can look forward to that is just Vlad the Impaler, because he did that while fighting two major powers.
Greater powers. Now, if you've watched all this series, you've probably concluded that Vlad cared more about gaining and keeping personal power than any noble cause. But as is often the case with nationalistic heroes, this was ignored in favor of a story that fit more neatly with 19th century Romanian politics. The image of Vlad as an independence fighter, doing what had to be done to keep his kingdom independent from the Ottomans, just felt true at the time, and turned Vlad into a national symbol. Though to be fair, even though Vlad remains a celebrated figure in modern Romania, many Romanians continue to debate over whether the country should really be proud of him. Who'da thunk it? This stuff's complicated.
Yeah, because let's be honest, he was fucked up. He killed people left and right and impaled thousands of people, forest of impaling. I mean, you can't really just, come out and celebrate that, but I guess, yeah.
But all of these disparate opinions of Vlad's story only served to make it more interesting. From a life that was messy, often confusing, and of, let's just say, ambiguous loyalties, later writers have crafted Vlad into everything from a nationalist icon, to horror character, to folklore figure, to literary vampire, and to bait for tourist traps. Meaning, he's a fascinating study in how, if you're famous enough, one day you may end up rising from your grave to become something else entirely. Which makes you want to take a good look in the mirror, doesn't it? Excuse me. Ooh, sorry, the smoke got my nose. If you enjoyed this series, I'd stake a large wager that there's a ton more content you'll enjoy from us and our creator friends, all ad-free over on...
Yeah, we'll go to curiositystream.com/extra credits and support this channel. Yeah, I mean, Vlad the Impaler in the end kind of got the better deal than anyone else gets, right? Writing your name in history at more than once, I guess, because he has so many different versions. He's embedded into the culture of, everyone, not just in a history book, but even in the culture, movies, TV shows. A book, famous book, right? A famous play. Obviously, in history, he is known as a hero in Romania. He got the better deal than most historical figure gets. So that is something. Alright, people, that was Vlad the Impaler, The Living Dead, Extra History Part 5 by the channel Extra Credits. I think that was the end of it. Yeah. Remember, people, if you, whatever video you want me to react to next from this channel, comment down. The video that gets more like, I'm going to react to that, because, it's really weird to start a series and then realize people don't want to watch this, right? It suddenly gets, I guess, extremely low views. Then I can't stop the series, really. So I guess, comment down which series you want me to react to from this channel, and, thumbs up if any of the comment is already there, or any of the video that you want to watch me react to as well is already there. Thumbs up that. So the video that gets more thumbs up, I'll react to that next, I guess. And yeah, I'll see you next time.